Chief Executive John Lee delivers his first policy address since taking office. He introduces light public housing to speed up the supply of residential units for the needy. The CE also announces the Top Talent Pass scheme to attract high-quality individuals to the city. Good evening and thanks for joining us on TVB News. Chief Executive John Lee delivered his first policy address at the Legislative Council today. In a 3-hour speech, he outlined plans to improve the city's competitiveness and people's livelihoods, while addressing many of Hong Kong's long-standing problems. Entitled Charting a Brighter Tomorrow for Hong Kong, the policy address gave details about bold measures to attract quality talents and enterprises from around the world. Eligible talents, upon becoming permanent residents, can get a refund of the extra stamp duty paid for purchasing residential property in the city. For medical support, the CE proposed subsidizing patients with chronic disease and referring them to private doctors for further treatment. The government will also allow shared use of the elderly health care voucher between spouses. To further develop transport infrastructure to support economic growth, John Lee suggested 3 major road projects and 3 strategic railway projects. In terms of housing and land supply, John Lee introduced the building of light public housing, which will provide 30,000 units in the next 5 years. He also said the public housing waiting time should be capped at 4.5 years. Sharon Tang begins our coverage.
Introducing light public housing, something new from the administration to alleviate the city's notorious housing shortage. Light refers to its concise and simple design, with the housing units being built using the modular integrated construction approach. Light public housing is equipped with the necessities found in traditional public housing units. Sources say the rent for light public housing units is 10% lower than the traditional ones. Priority will be given to family applicants and those who have been in the queue for at least 3 years. The overall public housing production in the coming 5 years will substantially go up by some 50% when compared with the previous 5-year period. Taking into account the total supply of light public housing and traditional ones, the overall waiting time for public housing is expected to be reduced from the current 6 years to 4.5 years. Meanwhile, the construction of transitional public housing will continue, with the target set at 20,000 units. The government will arrange phased and earlier completion of 9 public rental and subsidized housing projects over a 10-year period. John Lee expects 12,000 units under these projects to be completed within the next 5 years to allow early intake of flats by about 3 to 18 months by applicants.
Solving the housing problem tops the agenda of the current term government. We need breakthroughs in housing supply and solutions to address the long-term problem of housing shortage. The objective is to let people see the hope of getting on the housing ladder earlier and having more decent housing.
A subdivided flat resident in Sham Shui Po, who has been waiting for public housing for almost 10 years, finds the light public housing attractive because the rent of subdivided flats are much higher. All subsidized South flats completed from 2026 to 2027 onwards should have an area no less than 26 square meters. That's roughly 280 square feet. Newly built public homes must also adhere to similar standards. Lee also promised to have sufficient land for building at least 72,000 private housing units in the next 5 years. In terms of land supply, the CE said developing the Northern Metropolis, which was proposed by the previous administration, will be a new engine of growth. 2 committees, led by the CE and the financial secretaries respectively, will be set up to steer and coordinate the overall development. Authorities have identified 255 hectares of land in the Greenbelt zone for the development of 70,000 residential units. The rezoning of the first batch of sites will begin by 2024. Sharon Tang, TVB News.
The policy address also discussed building new highways and railways to spur the development of the new territories north. Jackie Lin reports.
The 6 newly unveiled major infrastructure projects include 3 railways and 3 main transport arteries. To help drive the development of the northern metropolis, a highway linking the east and west side of the new territories north will be built. It will stretch between Tinshui in the west and Kutong North in the east via Shenzhen. Following through on the proposal by the previous administration, the government is planning to build the Hong Kong-Shenzhen Western Rail Link. It will connect Hongshou and Shenzhen's Qianhai. It's understood that joint task forces in Hong Kong and Shenzhen are set to wrap up the first phase of research on the cross-border railway project. The second phase will get underway at the end of the year, during which its route and financial arrangements will be scrutinized. The railway will likely adopt the co-location arrangement, and authorities will look into the possibility of streamlining clearance for cross-border travelers. Also in the offing, a new central rail link, which aims at easing passenger loads along the Tu Ma line. It will link Campton and Yuen Long and Kowloon Tong via Kwai Chung. Another addition to the railway, the Chancon O line southern extension. It will extend the existing Chancon O line southwards to the district's new Area 137. Also complementing the development of Area 137 is the construction of a third road tunnel at Chancon O, connected with Yau Tong. Meanwhile, a new Shatin bypass will be on the way to alleviate pressure on the Tolo Highway. It will be a north-south trunk road linking Tai Po and Kowloon West. But the policy address didn't mention the timetable and financing for the projects. Sources say the government is not ruling out raising the necessary funds through issuing bonds. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
In his policy address, Chief Executive John Lee announced the launch of the Top Talent Pass scheme in a bid to attract high-quality individuals to the city and reverse its brain drain. Timothy Lee tells us more.
With the city facing the challenges of immigration, a brain drain, and labor shortages, Chief Executive John Lee has introduced a plan to entice talent back to Hong Kong, called the Top Talent Pass scheme. Individuals who have an annual salary of 2.5 million Hong Kong dollars, have graduated from one of the world's top 100 universities, and with at least 3 years of work experience over the past 5 years will be issued a 2-year pass. There will be no limitations to this quota. Sources say that registrants will be free to enter or leave the city whenever they choose, and will not be restricted by their assets. Those who have not worked for 3 full years but have graduated from the top universities within the past 5 years can still participate in the pass scheme, albeit limited on a quota of 10,000 people per year. Sources say such passes will be distributed on a first-come, first-served basis. A refund for extra stamp duty is available for eligible talent who purchase a residential property in Hong Kong from today onwards and subsequently become a permanent resident upon residing in the city for 7 years. They can register for a refund for the buyer's stamp duty and the new residential duty. But they will still have to pay their ad valorem stamp duty. With Singapore often regarded as Hong Kong's direct competitor for talent grabs, some believe that the new scheme has the potential to draw talent back to the city.
I think Hong Kong's a special place. Singapore's a nice place, but Hong Kong's a special place. And I think that the special factor of Hong Kong will draw people back in. People might move away temporarily, but I'm confident that they'll come back eventually.
Hong Kong's a better place than Singapore. Of course it is, but we need a more creative approach to the way we run the way we run Hong Kong. And Singapore has succeeded in many areas where Hong Kong has failed. Many companies have decided to relocate there.
The government said it will soon set up other new offices to recruit more talent to the city, including the Talent Service Unit. Facing manpower shortages across the city, the government will roll out its plan to attract more talent in the residential care home sector next year. The government will also review solutions to boost the number of laborers in the construction and transportation sectors. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
Chief Executive John Lee unveiled the government's plan on further enhancing healthcare services in Hong Kong in his policy address today. New measures include the setting up of a new authority to scrutinize healthcare services provided by public and private sectors. Christy Khan reports.
With Hong Kong still battling the COVID pandemic, Chief Executive John Lee announced that the government will revamp the city's healthcare system with a mission.
Our aim is to shift the emphasis of the healthcare system from its current treatment-oriented hospital-based structure to a prevention-focused, community-based system by investing additional resources to promote primary healthcare.
Lee said primary healthcare blueprints will be published this year, including setting up a new primary healthcare authority to coordinate and oversee healthcare services provided by the public and private sectors. Additionally, a 3-year chronic disease co-care pilot scheme is set to be launched next year, subsidizing people with chronic diseases to seek help from the private sector for medical examinations. The government will bear about half of the examination and treatment fees. The annual amount for the healthcare voucher scheme for the elderly, meanwhile, will be raised to $2,500 from the existing $2,000 for a 3-year period. Spouses of the elderly can also share their health vouchers. The vouchers will allow spending on services provided by more healthcare professionals such as audiologists, clinical psychologists, and speech therapists. The chief executive also said the government is exploring the possibility of allowing Hong Kong people living in the Greater Bay Area to use health vouchers to pay for healthcare services in the mainland. Furthermore, Lee said the government will increase the annual quota of its subsidized Chinese medicine outpatient service to 800,000 from 600,000. Separately, the city's chief said care teams will be set up in 18 districts in phases.
We will widely engage local organizations and groups to form care teams to pool together all sectors, including young people and ethnic minorities, to take part in community building. The care teams will organize caring activities, such as visiting the needy.
On the fight against the COVID pandemic, Lee reiterated that the government will not lie flat, saying that authorities will keep moving forward to adjust and ease anti-COVID curbs in the city. Chancon, TVB News.
The policy address also sets sights on improving governance. One of the measures is the launch of the Chief Executive's Award for Exemplary Performance next year, which aims at encouraging civil servants to constantly strive for excellence. A punishment system will be in place as well. Officers whose performances remain persistently substandard can be terminated in a timely manner. In addition, an update on the Civil Service Code to put the principle of patriots administering Hong Kong will be one of the required values. A chief executive's policy unit will be set up within this year to assist the government in policy formulation. On the enactment of Article 23 of the Basic Law, Lee says preparatory work will continue. The city logged 5,124 COVID cases today. That's 170 fewer infections than yesterday's tally. 4,734 are local infections, while 390 are imported cases. 9 more cases of the XBB variant were detected, meaning a total of 99 infections involving the strain have now been found in the city. A case of the XBD variant was also reported for the second straight day. Meanwhile, 7 residents of elderly care homes and 2 staff members tested positive for the coronavirus. 18 close contacts have to undergo quarantine. 688 positive cases were reported across 479 schools, including 12 schools that have suspended some of their classes. Another 12 COVID patients have died, with the 5th wave having claimed the lives of 10,084 people so far. Still ahead, the U.S., Britain, and France planning to raise alleged Iranian supplies of drones to Russia at a UN Security Council meeting. In the United States, Joe Biden vows to sign a law to codify abortion rights if the Democrats control Congress next year. And industries across France go on strike to push for pay hikes to keep up with rising inflation. Welcome back to TVB News. Russia is continuing its strategy of hitting Ukraine's energy facilities, leaving hundreds of thousands of people without power in many cities. Power was also knocked out at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, while shelling was reported in a nearby city. Moscow's new commander in Ukraine, meanwhile, admitted that the going is tough for Russian troops on the ground. Nazvi Karim reports.
During 8 months of war, Russia's fixed narrative has been that its special military operation in Ukraine was going according to plan, until now. The Russian Armed Forces' new commander in Ukraine, General Sergei Surovikin, is painting a more realistic, grimmer picture. Just a week into the job, Surovikin acknowledged that his forces were under pressure in the eastern and southern regions that Moscow claims to have annexed. He said the priority now was to preserve life and health for citizens, which is why Russia has asked civilians in 4 towns in the southern region of Kherson to evacuate. Vladimir Saldo, the Russian-installed head of Kherson, said authorities are planning to evacuate up to 60,000 people over the next few days. They expect Ukraine to launch a major attack on Kherson city and beyond that would drive Russian troops back to the banks of the Dnipro River, and they don't want civilians caught in the crossfire. Ukraine's nuclear operator, meanwhile, said Russian shelling cut power again to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And in a tit-for-tat blame game, both sides pointed the finger after the shelling of the nearby Russian-controlled town of Enerhodar, where many of the Zaporizhzhia plant workers live. This as Russia continues to hit power stations and water supplies across Ukraine, like this one in Zhytomyr, about 150 kilometers from the capital Kyiv. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said at least 30% of Ukraine's power stations have been hit. Zelensky also condemned Iran for supplying Russia with kamikaze drones, used to attack Kyiv and other cities on Monday. Russia and Iran denied the accusations. The United States, Britain and France were planning to raise alleged Iranian supplies of drones to Russia at a closed-door UN Security Council meeting today. The New York Times reported that Iran had sent technicians to occupied Ukraine to help Russia with the drones. Zelensky said Russia's use of Iranian weaponry showed the Kremlin's recognition of its military and political bankruptcy, and it will not help them in any way. Nazvi Karim, TVB News.
Ahead of November's midterm elections, U.S. President Joe Biden pledged to sign a law to codify abortion rights should the Democrats control Congress next year. This comes as Biden prepares to announce the release of 15 million barrels of oil from the U.S. Strategic Reserve as part of a response to recent production cuts announced by OPEC Plus nations. Daniel Rao tells us more.
In a campaign speech, U.S. President Joe Biden has pledged to codify abortion rights should Democrats control the legislature after November's midterm elections. The landmark 1973 Roe v. Wade ruling was overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court in June. The controversial move made it easier for U.S. state governments to take steps to limit or outlaw abortion outright.
That the final say does not rest in the court now. It does not rest with extremist Republicans in Congress. And if you do your part and vote, Democratic leaders in Congress, I promise you, will do our part. I'll do my part. And with your support, I'll sign a law codifying Roe in January.
Other key issues ahead of the midterms are largely economic. The current administration is looking to assure voters that it can rein in inflation and address fuel shortages. The latter issue will be addressed today as Biden is set to announce the release of 15 million barrels of oil from the U.S. Strategic Reserve. Washington is seeking to become more energy self-sufficient in the wake of production cuts announced by OPEC Plus nations. Biden is expected to say his administration will restock the Strategic Reserve when oil prices are at or lower than $67 to $72 a barrel. Daniel Rell, TVB News.
Workers from various industries went on strike across France on Tuesday, calling for pay increases to offset economic hardship caused by rising inflation in the country. Among those taking part were rail and other transport workers, secondary school teachers, and public hospital staff. They heeded a call by an oil workers' union for French industry to push for salary increases and protest government intervention in refinery strikes. The impact of these strikes could be immediately felt. Just 1 in 2 trains were running on Tuesday in France's southern region rail network. There were reports of disruptions on high-speed trains in the north, as well as on the Eurostar and intercity trains linking France with Spain. About 30% of France's petrol stations are experiencing temporary shortages. The government has launched requisitions at some refineries to get petrol back into tanks. That's the news. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.